Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Class 7 of Lawfare's hacking course. I am Scott Shapiro, and I am joined by the always lovely and amazing Sean O'Brien. Want to say hello, Sean?
Oh, hey, guys.
Okay, so today we are doing encryption. I will talk about the difference between TCP and UDP and exchanging ciphers. And then I'm going to hand it over to Sean, who is going to talk about the basics of encryption and symmetric encryption. I will then talk about asymmetric public key encryption, walking us through the RSA algorithm. And then Sean is going to take us out with generating private and public keys for PGP. Okay, so let us start and hope for the best. Okay, terrific. Okay, so this is our third class on networks. We will be doing the fourth class on networks next week, and we will be joined by Lauren Weisinger, who was the third member who helped design and teach this course. We're really excited about that. After that, we will have really established the basics of security and hacking, and then we will start hacking like crazy. Okay, so there's going to be some math today, not complex math, but some math and some. We're going to be throwing a lot of stuff at you, but we're getting there. We're almost there. Okay, so there are two basic ways in which packets are distributed over the internet. They either can be distributed using one protocol called UDP and the other one called TCP. Okay, so let me go over the difference between the two, and then I'll open up some Wireshark screens, and I'll show you how it works in practice. Okay, so UDP and TCP. So UDP, User Datagram Protocol, it is called a datagram because it's an analogy to a telegram. So when in the old days you send a telegram, you just send it off. There would be no acknowledgement of it. You just send it off. And that's the same thing about UDP. UDP, when packets are sent off via UDP, basically the sender sends the datagram, it goes to the router, hits either gets to the recipient or it doesn't, and the server of the sender keeps on sending these things over and over again. Let me I'll show you what Zoom looks like with UDP. Everyone can see this here. You can see that this was last night. I was talking to Sean over Zoom, and I captured packets. And you can see it's just a stream of UDP packets. It seems very simple. You're going from one port to another port, and it's all rather direct. And so the advantage of UDP is that it's very fast, but it's not particularly reliable. Like if you're sending packets over the internet, as we described last class, they can get lost, they can get corrupted, they can come out of order. And that's why sometimes with Zoom, you get glitchy things. And that is because what really matters is that you just keep on sending these packets of video to the person you're talking to. It doesn't actually have to be particularly reliable. It just has to be good enough. But with video, you're sending tons of stuff, so you really want it to be fast. TCP is different than that. TCP, when a TCP connection is made, there's a handshake between the sender and the receiver to make sure that there's a connection, like a phone call, okay? You use TCP for things like websites where it really does matter that the packets come in the right order and they're connected in the right way. It's a bit slower, because you have to first make the connection, but it is particularly reliable. Same thing if you're going to send an email or a file, you really want them to be in the right order. So this was the packet capture I just showed of Zoom, where you see the UDP stream. I also, this is an enlargement of a UDP datagram for DNS, for the domain name system. In this case, you could see, I did this at home, you can see my router is responding to my laptop. Probably I had entered a domain name into my browser, and my laptop wanted to know what the IP address, and they queried the router to find that out. How DNS works, we'll be talking about next week. But again, with DNS, you just want your answer quick. And if it doesn't work, you ask it again. Okay? Now, TCP, I said, was different. There, a connection is made, and a connection is made through what's called a three-way handshake. And what I want to show you over here is this is a packet capture of what I tried to show you last week, but it was really small when I tried to connect to the book website, The Internationalists, and it was an HTTP unencrypted website. And here you see that unlike the UDP stuff, where it's just a stream of datagrams, here the segments, you first see a SYN at the top, and that's synchronize. That's my laptop saying, hey, website, I'd like to talk to you. And then the next one is SYN-ACK, synchronize, acknowledge. This is the website saying, yes, I hear you. And then this is me saying ACK, acknowledge, yes, okay, I can hear that you can hear me. The way I think about it is like if I was calling Sean, I would say hello, that's SYN, and then he'd say hello, that's SYN-ACK, and I'd say, hey Sean, that's ACK. Okay, so this is a bit more activity than with UDP because you're setting up a connection, but it's pretty basic, straightforward. And then the next couple of segments are me entering information in an unencrypted fashion into a form and sending it to the website. Okay, but now let us look at the next screen. Now it's kind of ugly, lots of stuff going on there. I want to look towards like 60% down over here, packet number 17. You'll see SYN. That's my laptop trying to make a connection to an encrypted website, one that runs HTTPS, Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. That website says SYN-ACK, yes, I acknowledge your attempt to connect, and then I say ACK, okay, like acknowledge, let's go. But now notice what happens. Right after that, you'll see another segment that says client hello, and then 3 down, you'll see server hello, okay? And here, what is happening is that the two sides to the communication are going to synchronize the encryption scheme. And to see this, let me open up these client hello and server hello packets. Okay, so over here, you'll see handshake protocol. You'll see up here it says client hello. That was just, I'm enlarging the packet by clicking on it. And you'll see here cipher suites. And cipher is encryption algorithms. And what you'll see is that my laptop is saying, hey, I speak all these, I can handle all these kinds of algorithms. I can speak these languages. I can speak RSA. I can speak elliptical curve. I can do all these things. Website, how do you want to talk? And then the website comes back with with an answer to that, which is, why is my thing not? I am going to, okay, can you see that? Here we go. This is server hello. So this is what the server is responding, and it is picking elliptical curve, RSA, yada, 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 SHA-256. Okay, so what it's saying is, I want to speak this language. I want to use this algorithm. Okay, and that is the way in which, when there's encrypted communication, because there are many different kinds of encryption algorithms, both sides have to coordinate on the algorithm before they can talk. Okay, so this is the way in which in TCP, when there is encryption, both sides synchronize on which algorithm to use. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Sean, who will now talk more about the basics of encryption. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Let me share my quick encryption explainer. You all can see that, I hope. We want to talk about encryption in this class, and we want to do it in a way which, as we've promised, will not be painful. It's such a cool thing, and it also underlies so much of everything we do these days. You know, in the early days of the internet, when you ordered a Domino's pizza, you did not have an encrypted connection. And this magic that we have not only allows us to have encrypted connections for things like ordering a pizza, but it also allows us to verify individuals or servers or machines so that we can send information in a trustworthy way. And it's really, really cool stuff. So what is encryption? Encryption is the scrambling of data, right? Decryption is the unscrambling. I know that seems very obvious. But you can also do some obfuscation to hide some other stuff, right? And you see that every once in a while, especially if people are caring about, like, you know, IP and so on, intellectual property. But the most important thing we can get across to you in this class is that encryption relies upon a shared secret. Now, in symmetric encryption, a simple, for example, substitution cipher, as we would call it, that piece, that shared secret, is known to both parties. Going way back, like about the time of the written word, perhaps previous to what we know about that historically, there have been what we call substitution ciphers. And that means basically you take some information, let's say it's the Latin alphabet, right, A through Z, and you move it ahead a certain amount of letters. So if I say to you, hey, dog, right, the word dog is D-O-G, and I do a +1 for the cipher, now I'm doing E-P-H, right? And if you know that I've given you +1 as the cipher, and I hand you the information EPH, you know that the word is dog. Very simple. We tend to call this Caesar's cipher, although that may be too much of a sort of glorification of Julius Caesar. Who knows? These 3 shift letters are pretty common. You'll see this in basic stuff throughout military campaigns and so on through pretty much the early medieval phase of history. But what's really cool about this, and I think is more important to talk about, is that you can share that secret in a way that's not very obvious, right? It seems really silly that, okay, you shift a few letters, obviously you can intercept that. That's a really easy thing to intercept. But what if you take your message, right, and you wrap it around a rod of a certain width, and that rod, when you wrap it around that specific width, you can read the message, right? This is an old concept called a cytale that the Greeks used. This concept allowed them to share the rod. The rod is the secret, right? That's the cipher in this example. It's a physical manifestation of the way to decrypt the message. And then therefore you can have somebody just to like hold on to the rods, basically, rather than like saying, it's just, one or two letters forward. You then share the rod and wrap the message around it. So that sort of gives us a basic idea of how symmetric encryption works. You have a secret. It can be moved forward or scrambled or done some clever things. And throughout World War II, of course, we know all the famous examples with the Enigma machine and Alan Turing and so on of this symmetric example. But the important part is to think of that key as sort of the password, that shared secret in this example. And until the 1970s, right, that's all that mattered. I do want to say really quickly, that complexity matters. We've talked about it a little bit about why complexity is important. This slide sort of jokes about it a little bit, and we can go into it a little further when we talk more about digital self-defense later in the class. But complexity is a big deal for these kinds of schemes, right? But all of these, encryption examples, they power the world that we live in. They power everything that moves through the network. They power all these technologies that we're very much now used to using. However, symmetric key encryption is not the end all and be all. On this examples page, every single one of these examples is using asymmetric key encryption, which Scott will explain to you in a second here. And that is sort of, I don't want to call it a miracle, but it's an awesome thing that has arisen since the 1970s, where people have understood that you can share secrets in a way where you're not just taking that simple sort of rod-based approach where you're sharing one piece of information. You can share split information, right? Where the secret stays with the keeper of the secret, and there's another piece of information that allows them to communicate. And I'll let Scott explain that a bit further.
Sean, can you just tell people about crypto parties?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so in the earlier days of what we would call the encrypted internet, we used to have, spaces where people would be more trustworthy or trying to build trust based upon community, right, and identity. So people would meet and they would share keys. And they would, say, hey, I'm Sean, here's my key. I'm Scott, here's my key. And it would be buoyed up by the idea of the identity of the individual who was in that space. So this whole thing about web of trust, trusted exchange of information, was a big part of that in those early days. And we still talk about it now in different contexts. I think a lot of the things around, what people are starting to call Web 3 are starting to reinvent that idea of web of trust. And as you go into, Scott, this private public key exchange allows us to potentially reach that where we have identities. Sean is Sean 1 when he wants to do something, and Sean is Sean 2 when he wants to do something else. And in both contexts, they can be trusted, right? And if I go to a crypto party, I can have a badge and, et cetera, et cetera. We really are on the cusp in this class of understanding a lot of the basic concepts that hackers were relying upon in the early days. And now that you have that knowledge, and we'll expand upon it a little further, you will be much more prepared to go into the next version of the internet, whatever that turns out to be. So,
okay, thank you, Sean. So what I'm going to do is I am going to walk you through the algorithm using a simple example. I mean, the example I just adapted from the Wikipedia page, but I'm going to then try to explain why it works. Okay, so bear with me for a couple of minutes as I walk you through an example, and then I will then go back and try to show you why this works. Now, it is, as Sean said, magic. It's kind of like a miracle magic. I mean, the idea is that, as Sean was saying, with symmetric key encryption, you have the same key that can encrypt and then decrypt a message. Okay? What's wild about public key encryption is that, number one, is asymmetric. So the key that you use to encrypt your message is different than the key that you use to decrypt it. But the really wild thing is that the key that you use to encrypt your message is public. So like everyone knows your key. Like in a way, like using Sean's example, everyone knows the rod. But for some reason, only the person who has the private key can decrypt it. Okay, and that's like, it seems like impossible, but it isn't through the beauty of number theory. And this is what RSA 3 MIT, 2 MIT computer scientists and one mathematician came up with this in 1977. It was apparently invented in 1973 in Britain, though it was classified. It is really neat. Okay, so buckle up. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do is choose two random prime numbers. Okay, so I'm using small ones right here, and I'll show you like what Yale does, like the enormous numbers Yale uses. So let's take 61 and 53. Okay, P and Q. Now these are going to be like central. Okay, so only the person who is generating the public and private key pair, they know these two prime numbers, okay, P and Q, okay, and they shouldn't tell anybody, okay. Now what you do is you take P and Q and you multiply them to get N, which is your modulus. And then your modulus is, you may remember from high school math, but also we sent it in the email and it'll be on the repo. It's the number that you divide things by, okay. Again, this will all hopefully become clear as we go along. Okay, so P times Q is 61 times 53 is 3233. So that's your N, that's your modulus. Okay. Now, this irritating part, you have to subtract 1 from both P and Q, and then you multiply those two things together to get R. In this case, it's 3,120. Okay. Then you pick a random exponent, E, that is coprime to R, and coprime means that the only common factor that they share is 1. Okay, so pick 17. Okay, why? Because 17 and 3,120 share no factors other than 1. Okay, so now we have our public key, N and E. That is 3,233 and E17. Those are your public keys, and that is what you're going to tell the world. Okay? Now, you've just created your public key. Now you're going to generate your private key. Okay? The public key is going to be told to everyone. It's going to be used to encrypt messages, but your private key is going to be the thing that's going to be used to decrypt what has been encrypted with the public key. Okay, so choose a random number D so that D times E is equal to 1 when you divide it by R. I know that's a mouthful. Another way to put it is, if you take D and multiply it by 17 and then divide it by 3,120, you get 1. Okay, so let me show you what that would be. Take 2,753. Okay, so if you take 2,753 times 17 and then divide it by 3,120, you get 1. Okay, now D is your private key. Okay. I understand that this is not going to make much sense unless you're like a number theory person, but this is the way it works. Okay. Now, how do we encrypt? Okay. What we're going to do is let's take the ASCII value of the first letter of a message, and just for simplicity's sake, I picked the curly bracket, which is 123. The ASCII value of that is 123. So if I was just going to send a very short...
Pause on that, Scott. ASCII is what?
It's basically the numerical values that are associated with Latin character sets. It's a kind of an old way of doing it.
So it's how you would represent the letter A, B, C numerically, right?
Right. Thank you. So here the curly bracket would be represented by the number 123. Okay. So if I want to send curly bracket as my message, first I'm going to convert it to a number, the ASCII value, which is 123. And so what I'm going to do is encrypt the number 123. Okay. How do I do it? Well, C, which is the ciphertext, which is the encrypted message, what I'm going to do is take M to the E divided by N. What is that? It's 123 to the 17th power divided by 3,233. Okay? And whatever the remainder of that is the ciphertext, is the encrypted message. In this case, it's 855. Okay? So if you take 123 to the 17th power, and then you take the modulus 3,233, the remainder is 855. Okay? Now, what does that mean? Well, one way to think about this is you imagine a big circle. And the circle has a circumference of 3,233 steps. Okay, so if you take 3,233 steps around, you get to your starting point. Okay. Now, what the process of encryption says is walk around this circle 123 to the 17th power steps and see where you stop. Okay, so you're going to be going round and round and round and round and round and round and see where you stop, and you're going to stop at 855. Okay, that is the encrypted message, 855. So we took 123, we walked around the circle 123 to the 17th power, and we stopped at 855. That is our encrypted message. Okay. Now, how are we going to decrypt it? Okay. You take the ciphertext, which is 855, the public key and the private key, and you do this. Okay. You take C to the D modulo N, and you see what the remainder is. So it's 855, that's C, is 855 to 2,753, which is the private key. And then you divide it by 3,233, the modulos, and you see what's left over. And it better be 123 because that's the way it's supposed to work. And in fact, that is the answer. What is the remainder is 123. Put it another way. Let's go back to the circle. Okay. Take 800. This is how you would decrypt. You would take the same circle, which has the same circumference, and you would take 855 to the 2,753 power steps, and you see where you stop. And you're going to stop at 123. Okay? So think about the encryption is you have the circle, you're walking around 123 to the 17th power, and you stop at 855. To decrypt, you take 855 to the 2,753 power, modulo the 3,233, and you stop at 123. And you have now decrypted it. Okay? Now now why does this work? It works. The trick here is that it's virtually impossible to figure out how many steps you have to take around a circle that's 3,233 steps in circumference, where that number of steps has to be expressed as the number to the 17th power, and you stop at 855. The only way you could really do it is if you knew D. I mean, obviously you could do it with these small numbers, right? Because computers are powerful enough. But I'll show you the kinds of numbers that are used now. It is just mind-boggling, okay? So like, take the circle again. You know that the encrypted message is 855, but you want to decrypt it. And you know the public key, but you have to know how many steps you have to take around that as expressed by a number to the 17th power that you start at 855, and that is computationally extraordinarily difficult to do, okay? You can go from the message, the plain text, to the cipher using the public key. That's pretty easy. But it's really difficult to go from the cipher to the plain text without knowing the private key. And why this works is the person who generated the public key knows something that nobody else knows. They know the P and the Q that was used to create the modulos. Even though everyone knows the modulos, only the person who created the key pair knows the P and Q that was used to create it. Knowing the secret P and Q, the key pair generators can produce the public key, but also the private key. So P and Q produces the public key, but since it's private information, it can also produce the private key, and the private key can be used to decrypt the encrypted message in a very simple way. But if you don't have it, it's computationally extremely difficult, okay? And this is because of the issue of prime factorization. It's really easy to take two numbers and multiply them. It's really hard to factor them. If I told you what's 11, well, you take any two numbers, it's very easy to multiply them together. Now, if I gave you the product and I said, tell me what the factors are, it's much harder to break that down. And that's what RSA relies on, that it's easy going in one direction, but hard going in the other. Now, this is Yale's public key, or it was as of a year ago. Okay, this is the modulus. Remember the modulus that that we've been using, which was 3,233. Well, this is the modulus of Yale's. Look how unbelievably large that number is. This is in decimal. I converted it. It's in decimal. And then the exponent that we were using was 17. This is 65,537. So we're talking astronomical numbers. And so to try to factor these factor messages using these numbers is unbelievably difficult as computers get bigger, get more powerful. We keep on having to increase the length of the moduluses and the exponents, but these are just astronomical numbers. So again, RSA is asymmetric encryption. The parties share the public key, but only the sender knows the private key, okay? Now, the thing about asymmetric encryption is it's really secure and it's really convenient, but it's really slow because there's a lot of computation that's going on here. So it's kind of impractical to use RSA, to use asymmetric encryption, to send messages back and forth using this algorithm. The symmetric encryption is what Sean had mentioned, is that both parties share a private key, and the advantage is that it's extremely fast. The disadvantage is it's inconvenient. You have to go to a crypto party or something like that. Okay, so what has happened is that they created a system of hybrid encryption. So you use the asymmetric encryption to exchange a key between the two parties. And then you use that private key that you shared for the data exchange. So this combines the security and convenience of asymmetric encryption with the speed of symmetric encryption. So you use RSA to come up with a shared key, and you transfer that in using RSA, which is slow. But once you've done it, each has the same private key, and they can use symmetric encryption without going to a crypto party in order to exchange data in an encrypted fashion. I hope you don't hate me for having dragged you through that, but I think it's freaking cool. Okay, so I'm going to throw this over to Sean, who is going to help us, going to show us how to generate our own public and private keys.
Sure, and the first thing I want to make sure I say is not only is it freaking cool, that's a special presentation. Scott has been very humble about it, but I've seen many folks try to explain these concepts, and Scott is by far the best at it. I've never seen someone able to explain these concepts in the way he does. And that last piece is something that we really will, see over and over again. And we kind of did see, if you roll back the weeks and the things you've been seeing us hack, the idea that you can verify the identity of two parties, let's say two parties through a network, right, with asymmetric encryption, and then share a symmetric key to encrypt the data between, is a really, really fundamental concept that's really amazing. Now, what I'm going to show you, we call it inconvenient, we call it slow, and so on. But we do have computers these days which are pretty much supercomputers. It's kind of amazing that we can do what we're doing right now. I'm using a virtual machine, of course, to display over the internet. You all are coming in over the internet to watch the stream, and you all hopefully have some virtual machines on your end. But we'll be able to actually generate asymmetric keys on our own machines to do this thing called PGP. PGP is the first public expression of this asymmetric public-private key exchange that ended up coming through in the 90s by an individual named Phil Zimmerman. PGP, there were a number of fights over this technology for export control reasons from the United States government, but also because, people are scared of this kind of encryption. It's extremely powerful tool, which now we don't have to worry as much about. It's open source, right? If you all can go into your Kali machines, you see my terminal, I hope. We're going to go GPG. Now, GPG generates PGP keys, okay? We don't have to go into why those acronyms matter, but just know that the command is GPG, and you may see those two things used interchangeably, which is a bit confusing. Okay, so we're going to do GPG, and then we're going to do --full -generate, and then -key. Then we're going to hit enter. And now we're going to get sort of a prompt to walk us through the process, okay? We're going to use the RSA algorithm just like Scott just outlined. We can talk about DSA, these other things, if someone's interested down the line, maybe in the Q&A, but those are elliptic curve and so on. There are different ways to encrypt stuff. But we're going to say 1 in this case, hit enter. And then we're going to use a short key length for this example because it's quicker. We're going to do 1024. Now, when I say short, this is not short for the old days, but it's still short for nowadays. So we'll do 1024 and we'll hit enter. Now we should put a key expiry, right? So the sort of devil's problem with all these keys or whatever, the flip side of the coin of having a identity that's tied to an encrypted key that you publish to other people is that if you lose your secret key, you drop your phone or laptop in the ocean, you have it stolen, the hard drive goes kaput and you didn't back it up, then that key can live for a very long time. And if you upload it to these things we call the key servers, which I'll show you in a little bit, then that identity can just stay out there on the internet pretty much forever. So starting a key expiry is a really good idea, like saying, hey, it'll expire in a year, 2 years, 3 years. I tend to tell people in my workshops for Privacy Lab at Yale, 3Y here, so 3 years. It's pretty reasonable. All right, so if you lose your key, at least it'll die in 3 years, right? And then we say it's correct. We hit Y again. We hit enter. Now, in this example, I'm just going to use Kermit the Frog. You can use whatever fake thing you want to use. Muppets are always fun for me. So I'll do Kermit Frog, hit enter, and I'll do Kermit at lawfareblog.com. You can, again, use whatever fake identity you want to use. And no need for a comment, just hit enter. And then it says change it, etc. We go O for OK. We hit enter. Now, here's what's really interesting. So Kali and many other modern operating systems will say, hey, you need a passphrase to unlock this key. So not only do you have your key, there's a key ring in your operating system and a passphrase associated with it that's going to be like part of unlocking that when you use it with other software. So in this one, I'm just going to use a weak key. I'm just going to do Kali, K-L-A-I. K-L-A-I. Again, we're going to throw out these keys. We're not going to treat them seriously, but in your real life, you would want to have a strong passphrase here, of course. Hit enter. And it'll say, hey, it's not really that strong. We go take this one anyway. All right, now, as the key is being generated, I move around my mouse. This is such magic. I know it happened really, really fast. But back in the day, if you did this on a computer that was kind of like slow, or just the computers we used to use, which were kind of like slow, what's happening here is that key is being generated using a random number generator in your operating system. And that's a chaotic system, not to get into the math around all of that, but it relies upon the electrical signals coming through your processor, right? So if you move around your mouse and like open a bunch of stuff and like do a bunch of things, it makes the generation of that key that much more random. So if someone came back in a time machine and tried to like recreate the generation of that key, they still would have an extremely hard time generating that key, right? Because you did all that random stuff moving around your mouse. So T1000 Arnold Schwarzenegger can't get the same key, right? It's a weird thing, but I love it, and I just wanted to highlight it. Okay, let's clear now. We've got our key. It's associated with Kermit the Frog. It's Kermit at lawfareblog.com. Now let's actually do something useful with it. The first thing we need to do is we need to export that key in a format where we can use it for encryption. Okay, now this command is kind of long, and if you don't catch it, it's, again, we already published this stuff in the Git repo ahead of time because we know this is a little harder and a little more complicated than usual. But what we're going to do here, actually, and I'll put it on the desktop in this case. So we're doing GPG space -- output space, and then we're telling it where the output's going to go. ~/desktop, which is our home / desktop, which we've gone over. Kermit.pub, you can call it whatever you want. Armor, export, these options, just know that they need to be done. We can't explain them now. And then know that the key that's being used that we're exporting is Kermit at lawfareblog.com. So we're taking this GPG key, we're putting it into a file on our desktop, and we're using specific options to make sure that's pulling from the correct account. Okay, then we hit enter. Cool. Now what you'll see here is I have a new Kermit.pub on my desktop. If I open that with, let's say, can I find my text document? No. You know what I'll do? I'll just do a cat desktop Kermit.pub. And that'll show me this sequence of GPG characters. Now we're going to take a quick pause here because I want to show you why this matters. This is a PGP block. If you were to look up identities of people who have these PGP blocks on the internet, such as myself, Sean.O'Brien at Yale.edu, this is a key server that has a collection of these keys. Let's say I search for that key. And then I see, hey, there's all these identities. Some of these are some older identities I don't care about. I revoke some of them, which is another whole concept, but you can revoke your keys and say I don't use them anymore. But let's say I look at the key that is current for Sean O'Brien, Sean.O'Brien.Yale.edu, with this handsome photo of me from a few years ago. Let's say I click on that. You'll see a PGP block, which is very, very similar to the one we just generated for this current identity on this machine. But this block, Sean O'Brien has published on the internet for other people to use. As Scott said, this is like his telephone listing, my telephone listing in this case, not to talk too much to myself in the third person, my telephone listing, so other people can send me an encrypted message, and I'm the only person who can decrypt it. So we've now done, in 3 commands in the terminal, the same thing that a person uses to verify themselves on the internet. And this technology is used not just by me, who's like a hacker guy, or Scott, or anyone. It's used to really keep all collaboration of software at this point through the internet verifiable. So it's really, really cool, interesting stuff, and I hope we're all now to this step. Okay, let's clear real quick. And the last thing we're going to do with this key, it's cool that we've generated, it like created that key for Kermit. We understand that it's like this cool technology using this asymmetric key encryption, but how can we make it useful to like encrypt a secret message? Because of course we like sending secret messages here as hackers. Let's echo Kermit drinking tea, so echo space, and then we can put like whatever message you want. I just chose Kermit drinking tea. And then we're going to do what we've done in past homeworks. We're going to redirect it here to message.txt, okay? Now you can see on the desktop, here we go, message.txt has Kermit drinking tea in it. Now, how do we encrypt that with our GPG key? Now this command's a bit longer. We're going to go into it slowly. We go GPG space dash dash encrypt space dash dash sign space dash dash armor space. Again, this is a complicated thing. It's taken a while to get to this form, but if you follow the commands, you'll be able to figure it out. Then dash R. And then we're going to use the key, Kermit at lawfareblog.com, which is now on my system. If you called the Muppet something else, it'll be Fozzie or whoever you chose. And the thing we're encrypting is message.txt that we just created. And I go enter. It's going to ask me for that password that we set, right? So I'm going to do Callie because that's the weak password I set. And bam, now we have message.txt.asc. And I open that with my text editor, and you can see it's an encrypted PGP block. So if you sent this to someone and they knew your public key because you published it in a key server or you sent them your public key, okay, cool, right? They can verify that it's a message from you, right? But you're the only one who's going to be able to encrypt this thing on your machine. Because you have the private key to do so. And ideally, they would be the ones who create this message, Kermit drinking tea. Use your public key to encrypt it, right, in this step, and create this output and send it to you somehow. And you can see how useful that is. If I'm in a war zone or I have to publish this somewhere, even publicly on a website, I copy and paste this block into a website. No one else can decrypt this message except for the person or machine or individual who has a copy of that private secret key. And that's where things get so powerful. So now let's actually encrypt that. So we're going to, decrypt that. We're going to decrypt that message. We're going to go GPG --decrypt. This is where it gets fun. Message.text.asc. So I'm looking at this file right here. And I'm going to send that to message2.text. Okay? Hit enter. And now if I open that up, bam, Kermit drinking tea. Very simple, very basic concept, but you can see how powerful that is. And in a connected network where we all have to communicate with each other, it's allowed all commerce through the internet, all communications with any secrecy. It's an incredible thing. And if you know how to do it on your own as a quote-unquote hacker, or really anyone, you can really increase your privacy and security and so on. But also, like, it's a fundamental thing we should all know how it works. So thank you for following along with that. On top of the math, I realize that that's a lot to throw at you.
That was freaking fantastic, Sean. I was like, please, God, make Kermit drinking tea the
we knew it had to happen. The math had to work. But you never know with software.
No, I know, but it's still freaking amazing. I was like, yeah. So anyway, that was cool.
Thank you, Scott.
Next week, the band is going to be back. Lauren Weisinger, who excellent, fantastic person, unbelievably smart, knows knows so much, and we will be finishing up networks, and then we will be applying this knowledge. So bear with us, and we really appreciate you spending your Tuesday night with us. And good luck to all of us, and see you next week. Bye-bye.